Chapter 13. The 100 Days. Monsieur Noirtier was a true prophet, and things progressed rapidly, as he had predicted. Everyone knows the history of the famous return from Elba, a return which was unprecedented in the past, and will probably remain without a counterpart in the future. Louis XVIII made but a faint attempt to parry this unexpected blow. The monarchy had scarcely reconstructed, tottered on its precarious foundation, and at a sign from the emperor, the incongruous structure of ancient prejudices and new ideas fell to the ground. Villefort, therefore, gained nothing save the king's gratitude, which was rather likely to injure him at the present time, and the cross of the Legion of Honour, which he had the prudence not to wear, although M. de Blacas had duly forwarded the brevet. Napoleon would, doubtless, have deprived Villefort of his office had it not been for Noirtier, who was all-powerful at court, and thus the Girondin of '93 and the Senator of 1806 protected him, who so lately had been his protector. All Villefort's influence barely enabled him to stifle the secret Dantès had so nearly divulged. The king's procureur alone was deprived of his office, being suspected of royalism. However, scarcely was the imperial power established, that is, scarcely had the emperor re-entered the Tuileries and begun to issue orders from the closet into which we have introduced our readers, he found on the table there Louis XVIII's half-filled snuff-box. Scarcely had this occurred when Marseille began, in spite of the authorities, to rekindle the flames of civil war, always smouldering in the south, and it required but little to excite the populace to acts of far greater violence than the shouts and insults with which they assailed the royalists whenever they ventured abroad. Owing to this change, the worthy shipowner became at that moment, we will not say all-powerful, because Morel was a prudent and rather timid man, so much so that many of the most zealous partisans of Bonaparte accused him of moderation, but sufficiently influential to make a demand in favour of Dantès. Villefort retained his place, but his marriage was put off until a more favourable opportunity. If the emperor remained on the throne, Gérard required a different alliance to aid his career. If Louis XVIII returned, the influence of Monsieur de Saint-Méran, like his own, could be vastly increased, and the marriage be still more suitable. The deputy procureur was, therefore, the first magistrate of Marseille, when one morning his door opened, and Monsieur Morel was announced. Anyone else would have hastened to receive him, but Villefort was a man of ability, and he knew this would be a sign of weakness. He made Morel wait in the antechamber, although he had no one with him, for the simple reason that the king's procureur always makes everyone wait, and after passing a quarter of an hour in reading the papers, he ordered Monsieur Morel to be admitted. Morel expected Villefort would be dejected. He found him as he had found him 6 weeks before, calm, firm, and full of that glacial politeness, that most insurmountable barrier which separates the well-bred from the vulgar man. He had entered Villefort's office expecting that the magistrate would tremble at the sight of him. On the contrary, he felt a cold shudder all over him when he saw Villefort sitting there with his elbow on his desk, and his head leaning on his hand. He stopped at the door. Villefort gazed at him as if he had some difficulty in recognizing him. Then, after a brief interval, during which the honest shipowner turned his hat in his hands, "Monsieur Morel, I believe," said Monsieur Villefort. "Yes, sir." "Come nearer," said the magistrate with a patronizing wave of the hand, "and tell me to what circumstance I owe the honour of this visit." "Do you not guess, monsieur?" asked Monsieur Morel. "Not in the least, but if I can serve you in any way, I shall be delighted." "Everything depends on you." "Explain yourself, pray." "Monsieur," said Morel, recovering his assurance as he proceeded, "do you recollect that a few days before the landing of His Majesty the Emperor, I came to intercede for a young man, the mate of my ship, who was accused of being concerned in correspondence with the island of Elba. What was the other day a crime is today a title to favor. You then served Louis XVIII, and you did not show any favor. It was your duty. Today you serve Napoleon, and you are to protect him. It is equally your duty. I come, therefore, to ask what has become of him. Villefort, by a strong effort, sought to control himself. "What is his name?" said he. "Tell me his name." "Edmond Dantès." Villefort would probably have rather stood opposite the muzzle of a pistol at 25 paces than have heard this name spoken, but he did not blanch. "Dantès," repeated he. "Edmond Dantès." "Yes, monsieur." Villefort opened a large register, then went to a table. From the table turned to his registers, and then, turning to Morrel, "Are you quite sure you are not mistaken, monsieur?" said he, in the most natural tone in the world. Had Morrel been a more quick-sighted man, or better versed in these matters, he would have been surprised at the king's procureur answering him on such a subject, instead of referring him to the governors of the prison or the prefect of the department. But Morrel, disappointed in his expectations of exciting fear, was conscious only of the other's condescension. Villefort had calculated rightly. "No," said Morrel, "I am not mistaken. I have known him for 10 years, the last 4 of which he was in my service. Do not you recollect? I came about 6 weeks ago to plead for clemency, as I come today to plead for justice. You received me very coldly. Oh, the Royalists were very severe with the Bonapartists in those days." "Monsieur," returned Villefort, "I was then a Royalist, because I believed the Bourbons not only the heirs to the throne, but the chosen of the nation. The miraculous return of Napoleon has conquered me. The legitimate monarch is he who is loved by his people." "That's right," cried Morrel. "I like to hear you speak thus, and I augur well for Edmond from it." "Wait a moment," said Villefort, turning over the leaves of a register. "I have it. A sailor, who was about to marry a young Catalan girl. I recollect now, it was a very serious charge." "How so?" You know that when he left here he was taken to the Palais de Justice." "Well?" "I made my report to the authorities at Paris, and a week after he was carried off." "Carried off?" said Morrel. "What can they have done with him?" "Oh, he has been taken to Fenestrelle, to Pignerol, or to the Sainte Marguerite Island. Some fine morning he will return to take command of your vessel." "Come, when he will, it shall be kept for him. But how is it he is not already returned? It seems to me the first care of a government should be to set at liberty those who have suffered for their adherence to it." "Do not be hasty, Monsieur Morrel," replied Villefort. "The order of the imprisonment came from high authority, and the order for his liberation must proceed from the same source. And as Napoleon has scarcely been reinstated a fortnight, the letters have not yet been forwarded." "But," said Morrel, "is there no way of expediting all these formalities, of releasing him from arrest?" "There has been no arrest." "How?" "It is sometimes essential to government to cause a man's disappearance without leaving any traces, so that no written forms or documents may defeat their wishes." "It might be so under the Bourbons, but at present—" "It has always been so, Monsieur Morrel, since the reign of Louis XIV. The Emperor is more strict in prison discipline than even Louis himself, and the number of prisoners whose names are not on the register is incalculable." Had Morrel even any suspicions, so much kindness would have dispelled them. "Well, Monsieur de Villefort, how would you advise me to act?" asked he. petition the minister." "Oh, I know what that is. The minister receives 200 petitions every day, and does not read 3. "That is true, but he will read a petition countersigned and presented by me." "And will you undertake to deliver it?" "With the greatest pleasure. Dante was then guilty, and now he is innocent, and it is as much my duty to free him as it was to condemn him." Villefort thus forestalled any danger of an inquiry which, however improbable it might be, if it did take place, would leave him defenceless. "But how shall I address the minister?" "Sit down there," said Villefort, giving up his place to Morrel, "and write what I dictate." "Will you be so good?" "Certainly, but lose no time. We have lost too much already." "That is true. Only think what the poor fellow may even now be suffering." Villefort shuddered at the suggestion, but he had gone too far to draw back. Dante must be crushed to gratify Villefort's ambition. Villefort dictated a petition in which, from an excellent intention, no doubt, Dante's patriotic services were exaggerated, and he was made out one of the most active agents of Napoleon's return. It was evident that at the sight of this document, the minister would instantly release him. The petition finished, Villefort read it aloud. "That will do," said he. "Leave the rest to me." "Will the petition go soon?" "Today." "Countersigned by you?" "The best thing I can do will be to certify the truth of the contents of your petition." And sitting down, Villefort wrote the certificate at the bottom. "What more is to be done?" "I will do whatever is necessary." This assurance delighted Morrel, who took leave of Villefort and hastened to announce to old Dante that he would soon see his son. As for Villefort, instead of sending to Paris, he carefully preserved the petition that so fearfully compromised Dante, in the hopes of an event that seemed not unlikely, that is, a second restoration. Dante remained a prisoner and heard not the noise of the fall of Louis XVIII's throne, or the still more tragic destruction of the empire. Twice during the 100 days had Morrel renewed his demand, and twice had Villefort soothed him with promises. At last there was Waterloo, and Morrel came no more. He had done all that was in his power, and any fresh attempt would only compromise himself uselessly. Louis XVIII remounted the throne. Villefort, to whom Marseille had become filled with remorseful memories, sought and obtained the situation of King's Procureur at Toulouse, and a fortnight afterwards he married Mademoiselle de Saint-Méran, whose father now stood higher at court than ever. And so Dante, after the 100 days and after Waterloo, remained in his dungeon, forgotten of earth and heaven. Danglars comprehended the full extent of the wretched fate that overwhelmed Dante, and when Napoleon returned to France, he, after the manner of mediocre minds, termed the coincidence a decree of Providence. But when Napoleon returned to Paris, Danglars' heart failed him, and he lived in constant fear of Dante's return on a mission of vengeance. He therefore informed M. Morrel of his wish to quit the sea, and obtained a recommendation from him to a Spanish merchant, into whose service he entered at the end of March, that is, 10 or 12 days after Napoleon's return. He then left for Madrid, and was no more heard of. Fernand, understanding nothing except that Dante was absent, what had become of him he cared not to inquire. Only during the respite the absence of his rival afforded him, he reflected partly on the means of deceiving Mercédès as to the cause of his absence, partly on plans of emigration and abduction, as from time to time he sat sad and motionless on the summit of Cape Faro, at the spot from whence Marseille and the Catalans are visible, watching for the apparition of a young and handsome man, who was for him also the messenger of vengeance. Fernand's mind was made up. He would shoot Dante and then kill himself. But Fernand was mistaken. A man of his disposition never kills himself, for he constantly hopes. During this time, the empire made its last conscription, and every man in France capable of bearing arms rushed to obey the summons of the emperor. Fernand departed with the rest, bearing with him the terrible thought that while he was away, his rival would perhaps return and marry Mercédès. Had Fernand really meant to kill himself, he would have done so when he parted from Mercédès. His devotion and the compassion he showed for her misfortunes produced the effect they always produce on noble minds. Mercédès had always had a sincere regard for Fernand, and this was now strengthened by gratitude. "My brother," said she as she placed his knapsack on his shoulders, "be careful of yourself, for if you are killed, I shall be alone in the world." These words carried a ray of hope into Fernand's heart. Should Dante not return, Mercédès might one day be his. Mercédès was left alone face to face with the vast plain that had never seemed so barren, and the sea that had never seemed so vast. Bathed in tears, she wandered about the Catalan village. Sometimes she stood mute and motionless as a statue, looking towards Marseille, at other times gazing on the sea and debating as to whether it were not better to cast herself into the abyss of the ocean, and thus end her woes. It was not want of courage that prevented her putting this resolution into execution, but her religious feelings came to her aid and saved her. Caderousse was, like Fernand, enrolled in the army, but, being married and 8 years older, he was merely sent to the frontier. Old Dante, who was only sustained by hope, lost all hope at Napoleon's downfall. 5 months after he had been separated from his son, and almost at the hour of his arrest, he breathed his last in Mercédès' arms. M. Morel paid the expenses of his funeral, and a few small debts the poor old man had contracted. There was more than benevolence in this action. There was courage. The South was aflame, and to assist even on his deathbed the father of so dangerous a Bonapartist as Dante was stigmatized as a crime. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. The Two Prisoners. A year after Louis XVIII's restoration, a visit was made by the Inspector General of Prisons. Dante, in his cell, heard the noise of preparation, sounds that at the depth where he lay would have been inaudible to any but the ear of a prisoner, who could hear the splash of the drop of water that every hour fell from the roof of his dungeon. He guessed something uncommon was passing among the living, but he had so long ceased to have any intercourse with the world that he looked upon himself as dead. The inspector visited, one after another, the cells and dungeons of several of the prisoners, whose good behaviour or stupidity recommended them to the clemency of the government. He inquired how they were fed, and if they had any request to make. The universal response was that the fare was detestable, and that they wanted to be set free. The inspector asked if they had anything else to ask for. They shook their heads. What could they desire beyond their liberty? The inspector turned smilingly to the governor. "I do not know what reason a government can assign for these useless visits. When you see one prisoner, you see all. Always the same thing, ill-fed and innocent. Are there any others?" "Yes, the dangerous and mad prisoners are in the dungeons." "Let us visit them," said the inspector with an air of fatigue. "We must play the farce to the end. Let us see the dungeons." "Let us first send for 2 soldiers," said the governor. "The prisoners sometimes, through mere uneasiness of life, and in order to be sentenced to death, commit acts of useless violence, and you might fall a victim." "Take all the needful precautions," replied the inspector. 2 soldiers were accordingly sent for, and the inspector descended a stairway so foul, so humid, so dark as to be loathsome to sight, smell, and respiration. "Oh," cried the inspector, "who can live here?" "A most dangerous conspirator, a man we are ordered to keep the most strict watch over, as he is daring and resolute." "He is alone?" "Certainly." "How long has he been there?" "Nearly a year." "Was he placed here when he first arrived?" "No, not until he attempted to kill the turnkey who took his food to him." "To kill the turnkey?" "Yes, the very one who is lighting us. Is it not true, Antoine?" asked the governor. "True enough. He wanted to kill me," returned the turnkey. "He must be mad," said the inspector. "He is worse than that. He is a devil," returned the turnkey. "Shall I complain of him?" demanded the inspector. "Oh no, it is useless. Besides, he is almost mad now, and in another year you'll be quite so." "So much the better for him. He will suffer less," said the inspector. He was, as this remark shows, a man full of philanthropy, and in every way fit for his office. "You are right, sir," replied the governor, "and this remark proves that you have deeply considered the subject. And now we have in a dungeon about 20 feet distant, and to which you descend by another stair, an abbé, former leader of a party in Italy, who has been here since 1811, and in 1813 he went mad, and the change is astonishing. He used to weep. He now laughs. He grew thin. He now grows fat. You had better see him, for his madness is amusing." "I will see them both," returned the inspector. "I must conscientiously perform my duty." This was the inspector's first visit. He wished to display his authority. "Let us visit this one first," added he. "By all means," replied the governor, and he signed to the turnkey to open the door. At the sound of the key turning in the lock and the creaking of the hinges, Dante, who was crouched in a corner of the dungeon, whence he could see the ray of light that came through a narrow iron grating above, raised his head. Seeing a stranger, escorted by 2 turnkeys holding torches, and accompanied by 2 soldiers, and to whom the governor spoke bareheaded, Dante, who guessed the truth, and that the moment to address himself to the superior authorities was come, sprang forward with clasped hands. The soldiers interposed their bayonets, for they thought that he was about to attack the inspector, and the latter recoiled 2 or 3 steps. Dante saw that he was looked upon as dangerous. Then, infusing all the humility he possessed into his eyes and voice, he addressed the inspector, and sought to inspire him with pity. The inspector listened attentively, then turning to the governor, observed, "He will become religious. He is already more gentle. He is afraid, and retreated before the bayonets. Madmen are not afraid of anything. I made some curious observations on this at Charenton." Then turning to the prisoner, "What is it you want?" said he. "I want to know what crime I have committed, to be tried, and if I am guilty, to be shot. If innocent, to be set at liberty." "Are you well fed?" said the inspector. "I believe so. I don't know. It's of no consequence. What matters really, not only to me, but to officers of justice and the king, is that an innocent man should languish in prison, the victim of an infamous denunciation, to die here, cursing his executioners." "You are very humble today," remarked the governor. "You are not so always. The other day, for instance, when you tried to kill the turnkey." "It is true, sir, and I beg his pardon, for he has always been very good to me. But I was mad." "And you are not so any longer?" "No, captivity has subdued me. I have been here so long." "So long? When were you arrested, then?" asked the inspector. "The 28th of February, 1815, at 2:30 in the afternoon." "Today is the 30th of July, 1816. Why, it is but 17 months." "Only 17 months," replied Dante. "Oh, you do not know what is 17 months in prison. 17 ages, rather, especially to a man who, like me, had arrived at the summit of his ambition, to a man who, like me, was on the point of marrying a woman he adored, who saw an honorable career open up before him, and who loses all in an instant, who sees his prospects destroyed, and is ignorant of the fate of his affianced wife, and whether his aged father be still living. 17 months captivity to a sailor accustomed to the boundless ocean is a worse punishment than human crime can ever merit. Have pity on me, then, and ask for me not intelligence, but a trial, not pardon, but a verdict. A trial, sir. I ask only for a trial, that surely cannot be denied to one who is accused." "We shall see," said the inspector. Then, turning to the governor, "On my word, the poor devil touches me. You must show me the proofs against him." "Certainly, but you will find terrible charges." "Monsieur," continued Dante, "I know it is not in your power to release me, but you can plead for me. You can have me tried, and that is all I ask. Let me know my crime and the reason why I was condemned. Uncertainty is worse than all." "Go on with the lights," said the inspector. "Monsieur," cried Dante, "I can tell by your voice you are touched with pity. Tell me at least to hope." "I cannot tell you that," replied the inspector. "I can only promise to examine into your case." "Oh, I am free! Then I am saved!" "Who arrested you?" "Monsieur Villefort. See him and hear what he says." "Monsieur Villefort is no longer at Marseille. He is now at Toulouse." "I am no longer surprised at my detention," murmured Dante, "since my only protector is removed." "Had Monsieur Villefort any cause of personal dislike to you?" "None. On the contrary, he was very kind to me." "I can then rely on the notes he has left concerning you?" "Entirely." "That is well. Wait patiently, then." Dante fell on his knees and prayed earnestly. The door closed, but this time a fresh inmate was left with Dante. Hope. "Will you see the register at once?" asked the governor, "or proceed to the other cell?" "Let us visit them all," said the inspector. "If I once went up those stairs, I should never have the courage to come down again." "Ah, this is not like the other, and his madness is less affecting than this one's display of reason." "What is his folly?" "He fancies he possesses an immense treasure. The first year he offered the government 1,000,000 of francs for his release, the second 2, the third 3, and so on progressively. He is now in his 5th year of captivity. He will ask to speak to you in private, and offer you 5,000,000. "How curious! What is his name?" "The Abbé Faria." "Numero 27, said the inspector. "It is here. Unlock the door, Antoine." The turnkey obeyed, and the inspector gazed curiously into the chamber of the mad abbé. In the centre of the cell, in a circle traced with a fragment of plaster detached from the wall, sat a man whose tattered garment scarcely covered him. He was drawing in this circle geometrical lines, and seemed as much absorbed in his problem as Archimedes was when the soldier of Marcellus slew him. He did not move at the sound of the door, and continued his calculations until the flash of the torches lighted up with an unwonted glare the sombre walls of his cell. Then, raising his head, he perceived with astonishment the number of persons present. He hastily seized the coverlet of his bed and wrapped it around him. "What is it you want?" said the inspector. "I, monsieur?" replied the abbé with an air of surprise. "I want nothing." "You do not understand," continued the inspector. "I am sent here by government to visit the prison, and hear the requests of the prisoners." "Oh, that is different," cried the abbé, "and we shall understand each other. I hope." "There now," whispered the governor. "It is just as I told you. Monsieur, continued the prisoner, I am the Abbé Faria, born at Rome. I was for 20 years a cardinal's father's secretary. I was arrested. Why, I know not. Toward the beginning of the year 1811. Since then, I have demanded my liberty from the Italian and French government. Why from the French government? Because I was arrested at Piombino, and I presume that, like Milano and Florence, Piombino has become the capital of some French department. Ah, said the inspector, you have not the latest news from Italy. My information dates from the day on which I was arrested, returned the Abbé Faria. And as the Emperor had created the kingdom of Rome for his infant son, I presume that he has realized the dream of Machiavelli and Cesare Borgia, which was to make Italy a united kingdom. Monsieur, returned the inspector, Providence has changed this gigantic plan you advocate so warmly. It is the only means of rendering Italy strong, happy, and independent. Very possibly. Only I am not come to discuss politics, but to inquire if you have anything to ask or to complain of. The food is the same as in other prisons. That is, very bad. The lodging is very unhealthful, but on the whole, passable for a dungeon. But it is not that which I wish to speak of, but a secret I have to reveal of the greatest importance. We are coming to the point, whispered the governor. It is for that reason I am delighted to see you, continued the abbé, although you have disturbed me in a most important calculation, which, if it succeeded, would possibly change Newton's system. Could you allow me a few words in private? What did I tell you? Said the governor. You knew him, returned the inspector with a smile. What you ask is impossible, monsieur, continued he, addressing Faria. But, said the abbé, I would speak to you of a larger sum, amounting to 5 millions. The very sum you named, whispered the inspector in his turn. However, continued Faria, seeing that the inspector was about to depart, it is not absolutely necessary for us to be alone. The governor can be present. Unfortunately, said the governor, I know beforehand what you are about to say. It concerns your treasures, does it not? Faria fixed his eyes on him with an expression that would have convinced anyone else of his sanity. Of course, said he. Of what else should I speak? Mr. Inspector, continued the governor, I can tell you the story as well as he, for it has been dinned in my ears for the last 4 or 5 years. That proves, returned the abbé, that you are like those of Holy Writ, who having ears hear not, and having eyes see not. My dear sir, the government is rich and doesn't want your treasures, replied the inspector. Keep them until you are liberated. The abbé's eyes glistened. He seized the inspector's hand. But what if I am not liberated? Cried he, and am detained here until my death? This treasure will be lost. Had not government better profit by it? I will offer 6 million, and I will content myself with the rest, if they will only give me my liberty. On my word, said the inspector in a low tone, had I not been told beforehand that this man was mad, I should believe what he says. I am not mad, replied Faria, with that acuteness of hearing peculiar to prisoners. The treasure I speak of really exists, and I offer to sign an agreement with you in which I promise to lead you to the spot where you shall dig, and if I deceive you, bring me here again. I ask no more. The governor laughed. Is the spot far from here? 100 leagues. It is not ill planned, said the governor. If all the prisoners took it into their heads to travel 100 leagues, and their guardians consented to accompany them, they would have a capital chance of escaping. The scheme is well known, said the inspector, and the abbé's plan has not even the merit of originality." Then turning to Faria, "I inquired if you are well fed," said he. "Swear to me," replied Faria, "to free me if what I tell you prove true, and I will stay here while you go to the spot." "Are you well fed?" repeated the inspector. "Monsieur, you can run no risk, for as I told you, I will stay here, so there is no chance of me escaping." "You do not reply to my question," replied the inspector impatiently. "Nor you to mine," cried the abbé. "You will not accept my gold. I will keep it for myself. You refuse me my liberty. God will give it to me." And the abbé, casting away his coverlet, resumed his place and continued his calculations. "What is he doing there?" said the inspector. "Counting his treasures," replied the governor. Faria replied to this sarcasm with a glance of profound contempt. They went out. The turnkey closed the door behind them. "He was wealthy once, perhaps," said the inspector. "Or dreamed he was, and awoke mad." "After all," said the inspector, "if he had been rich, he would not have been here." So the matter ended for the Abbé Faria. He remained in his cell, and this visit only increased the belief in his insanity. Caligula or Nero, those treasure-seekers, those desirers of the impossible, would have accorded to the poor wretch, in exchange for his wealth, the liberty he so earnestly prayed for. But the kings of modern times, restrained by the limits of mere probability, have neither courage nor desire. They fear the ear that hears their orders, and the eye that scrutinizes their actions. Formerly they believed themselves sprung from Jupiter and shielded by their birth, but nowadays they are not inviolable. It has always been against the policy of despotic governments to suffer the victims of their persecutions to reappear. As the Inquisition rarely allowed its victims to be seen with their limbs distorted and their flesh lacerated by torture, so madness is always concealed in its cell, from whence should it depart, it is conveyed to some gloomy hospital, where the doctor has no thought for man or mind in the mutilated being the jailer delivers to him. The very madness of the Abbé Faria, gone mad in prison, condemned him to perpetual captivity. The inspector kept his word with Dante. He examined the register and found the following note concerning him. Edmond Dantès, violent Bonapartist, took an active part in the return from Elba. The greatest watchfulness and care to be exercised. This note was in a different hand from the rest, which showed that it had been added since his confinement. The inspector could not contend against this accusation. He simply wrote, "Nothing to be done." This visit had infused new vigour into Dante. He had, till then, forgotten the date. But now, with a fragment of plaster, he wrote the date, 30th of July, 1816, and made a mark every day in order not to lose his reckoning again. Days and weeks passed away, then months. Dante still waited. He at first expected to be freed in a fortnight. This fortnight expired. He decided that the inspector would do nothing until his return to Paris, and that he would not reach there until his circuit was finished. He therefore fixed 3 months. 3 months passed away, then 6 more. Finally 10 months and a half had gone by, and no favourable change had taken place, and Dante began to fancy the inspector's visit but a dream, an illusion of the brain. At the expiration of a year, the governor was transferred. He had obtained the charge of the fortress at Ham. He took with him several of his subordinates, and amongst them Dante's jailer. A new governor arrived. It would have been too tedious to acquire the names of the prisoners. He learned their numbers instead. This horrible place contained 50 cells. Their inhabitants were designated by the numbers of their cell, and the unhappy young man was no longer called Edmond Dantès. He was now number 34. End of chapter 14.